Chairman. I think we should just deal with the first motion, and then we can discuss it and then move on to the next one.
Explain this first one. I got two, so you have to tell me which one.
Yes, sir. Motion number one is was written actually started this week, not knowing that the likelihood of us going into the gray lockdown zone was imminent, and it was sent to Dr. Kurji and his team and vetted by them before it was sent out to members of council. And I would concur with Mayor Taylor's earlier comments that it might not make a whole lot of sense to send something like this now if going into lockdown is imminent. But I do believe that letting the province know if we are in agreement that there's some tweaking, I think, that needs to happen that speaks to certainly our Dr. Kurji's thinking when it comes to our local retail and restaurants and gyms and our local economies and where the spread of COVID is actually taking place. And I feel like it's incumbent on us, if there's a way to send a message that we want to get behind our local entrepreneurs and find ways for them to be successful, we need to do that. And so I would be, I'm happy to let this motion stand. And if it were to pass, we can send it down to Queen's Park. Obviously, if we do go into lockdown, it is moot at this time, but I think it declares a position of when we come out of lockdown and probably into the red zone, or, I would imagine we go into the red zone first before we're maybe moved into another zone, that these are the types of things that we are wanting to do, recognizing that our local economies are, they're not even just hanging on by a thread anymore. They're on life support. So I think the motion speaks clearly for itself. I did want to, ensure that it was vetted by Dr. Kurji and his team for accuracy. And I think we heard this morning his statements that he would concur with certainly the second whereas that Mayor Taylor called out in his comments earlier. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair, and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Lovatt. I believe it's moved by yourself and seconded by Mayor Maracas. I have that, sir. Before I get, and then, yes, sir. Yes, Mayor Scarpetti, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I apologize. Can we have the motion put up on the screen?
Yes.
Please?
Yes. Just so I get speakers list, so you're going to be the first one.
Well, no, let me see the motion for others can speak. I don't know that I necessarily got it last night. I think I may have gotten it this morning, but I just want to make sure.
Okay, put it up and everybody get a chance to read it.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, and then I'll take it down. But I think Mayor Taylor wants to speak, and I'm not sure who else, but I'll come back to you all.
Could Mayor Lovatt read it?
It's up now, eh?
Yeah,
it's on the screen, sir.
I need a new pair of glasses, so could you read it?
Whereas the impact of COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on our local economies and small business owners, and whereas there is no data demonstrating that restaurants, gyms, and local independent retail stores are a source of community spread of COVID-19 in the York region, and whereas many restaurants have a seating capacity well beyond 10, the current limit under the Control Red restrictions, and whereas it seems contradictory for a restaurant that has the capacity of 16 to allow 10 patrons, the same as a restaurant with a capacity of 200. And whereas the accepted COVID-19 safety standards for physical distancing is 2 meters, and whereas restaurants and stores are already subject to all COVID-19 public health safety protocols and inspections and have an excellent record of compliance on a percentage basis, and whereas restaurants and stores have invested tens of thousands of dollars in training, PPE, sanitizers, air filtration, and purification systems to protect and ensure the highest levels of safety for their staff and their patrons. And whereas many restaurants have to maintain large staff complements to remain open, even when only serving 10 patrons indoors. And whereas British Columbia's Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Bonnie Henry, and Alberta's Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, have both publicly shared data on transmissions in their provinces and have acknowledged that restaurants operating at 50% capacity with proper safety measures in place can provide a safe environment to meet with family members. And whereas the closure of in-person dining has driven people to congregate in homes where there is clear data and contact tracing of community spread of COVID-19 through these gatherings, and whereas a number of restaurants have already closed permanently, with many more facing the same fate, throwing owners into financial ruin and their employees into poverty, and whereas retail establishments have no set capacity limits under the control red restrictions, therefore be it resolved, the York Region Council call on the province of Ontario's health table to amend its control red restrictions for restaurants, operations at 50% capacity as sanctioned by local fire and public health officials, require patrons to be seated at tables 3 meters apart minimum or impenetrable barrier between tables, limit of 4 people seated together unless from the same family unit living together. Establishments must close in-person dining by 10:30 p.m., last call at 10 p.m. For all retail and gyms operating at 25% capacity as sanctioned by local fire and public health. And 2, that a copy of this be sent to the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Provincial Health Table, Premier, Deputy Premier, all York Region MPPs, all regional chairs, and regional medical officers of health in the GTA.
Thank you. Okay, Mayor Lovatt, the last comment, and then I'm going to get to the question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. The 50% capacity actually came from the Chief Medical Officers of Health in BC and Alberta. So that's where that percentage came from. The closing in-person dining at 10:30 came at the request of Restaurants Canada to allow restaurants to have 2 seatings for dinner. Most do have a 6 o'clock seating and an 8 o'clock seating. And closing, I think it was at 9 o'clock, was challenging to have a second seating for some establishments. So that's why that was put out to 10:30. So there is some science, whether you call it science or not, there's some rationale behind certainly that. And then, lastly, I think that listening, I appreciate all the comments from my colleagues, and I think we're all in spirit and the same on the same team and page here. So I'd like to make a couple of amendments in hopes that we can get this passed. And it would be in the, therefore, be it resolved that York Region Council call on the Province of Ontario's Health Table to review its control red restrictions and consider the following changes. Restaurants replace the limit of 10 patrons and cap operations at 50% as sanctioned by local fire and public health, and then the rest would be the same. So basically, we're saying, when this was drafted, we weren't staring down lockdown, and so this was hopefully a way to try and get more, butts and seats in restaurants to try and help. So realizing that timing is an issue, as Councillor Rosati just said, and I don't disagree with him. Changing the nuance that we're asking the province to review it, I think, is a future tense motion, and consider these changes. Whether they throw them out, that's up to them. But I think that there's not enough whereases in the world in a motion to bring all the science to try and sway somebody. And I think if they get this motion, and if someone watches this at a later date, they certainly get the intention of what we're trying to accomplish. So, Mr. Chair, with those amendments, I'd like to let the motion stand.
And I guess Member Ack is okay with that?